When things are going well, everyone is inclined to speak kindly. Everyone is ready to stand by each other. At that time, kindness needs no test. People's hearts remain untouched. The ancients saw this very clearly. They didn't use favorable circumstances to judge people, but rather used adversity to examine their true nature. When adversity arises, benefits diminish, power wanes, and relationships once thought strong begin to crumble. It's not because people have become worse, but because the facade has fallen away. What remains is what is real. It is in this context that one's character becomes the deciding factor. Winning hearts and minds during difficult times cannot rely on promises. When things get tough, promises often lack the power to succeed. Nor can it rely on rewards, as rewards are no longer available. The only thing that remains is attitude, how you treat others when you have little left to give. The ancients taught that in adversity, people don't look at what you say, but at what you uphold. Do you maintain fairness? Do you maintain respect? Do you maintain consistency? When you don't change your approach to the situation, people will remember it deeply. Some people are generous when things go well, but harsh when things get tough. They are approachable when they have power, but cold and distant when they lose it. Ancient wisdom suggests that these changes, while understandable, can alienate people. After all, what people fear most is being treated differently when circumstances change. Conversely, those who maintain their composure during difficult times, who don't burden others, don't blame, don't take the sacrifices of others for granted, will win people's hearts, not for personal gain, but for a sense of duty. In adversity, a well-chosen word, a fair decision, an unbiased action, all carry far more weight than in times of prosperity, because then, others know you are suffering a loss, but still doing nothing wrong. This self-restraint builds profound credibility. The ancients also emphasized that difficult times are when you must know how to retain people. It's not by making grand promises, but by honesty, clarity, and respect. When you cannot give much, give the truth. When you cannot guarantee results, guarantee a positive attitude. This video will share the principles passed down through generations. Will help you understand why some people overcome adversity and yet remain loyal, even more so than before. This is not luck, but the result of a character that has been cultivated over a long period. If you're going through a tough time, or have experienced loss due to upheaval, listen until the end. You might find a perspective that will help you stand stronger and preserve the relationships that are truly worth keeping. Subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to learn together how to live a resilient life, protect others, and protect yourself when life challenges you. One the ancients said, when you have profit, you judge people by their eyes. When profit is gone, you judge people by their hearts. This saying sounds simple, but it touches upon the deepest essence of human relationships. It's not just advice on how to behave, but the culmination of countless experiences of gain and loss. Success and failure learned over generations. When self-interest prevails, people tend to judge each other visually. That is, they look at outward appearances, at words, at pleasant attitudes, at what benefits them. In favorable times, everyone can appear kind. Everyone can say nice things. Everyone can stand by each other. They believe what they see, and they are very easily swayed. During this period, distinguishing between truth and falsehood was difficult. Self-interest was like a powerful light. It obscured the hidden corners of people's hearts. It was easy to confuse sincerity with cunning, loyalty with calculation, genuine companionship with collusion for personal gain. But at that time, few questioned it, because everything was flowing smoothly. The ancients did not deny the value of favorable circumstances. They did not use them to judge people's character, because they understood that the eyes only see the surface. The eyes see actions, see words, but not motives. They do not see what will happen when the advantage is gone. When gains are lost, circumstances change, power diminishes, money dwindles, or status is no longer what it once was. People no longer judge each other by sight. They judge by heart, by deep inner feelings, by comparing the past and the present, by remembering who stayed, who left, who changed their attitude, and who maintained their old ways. Judging people with your heart means looking at what they don't say. You see how they remain silent or speak up. You see how they behave when there's no longer any benefit to be gained. You see whether they maintain respect, whether they uphold fairness, and whether they remain consistent. Ancient wisdom holds that it is only during times of gain and loss that a person's true nature is revealed. This isn't because people become bad, but because there's no longer any reason to conceal their true selves. When free from the constraints of self-interest, people will act closer to their true nature. And only then will the mind be calm enough to see clearly. Seeing people with your heart is when you begin to deeply understand your relationships. Those who were once very close disappear when difficulties arise, leaving a cold void. Those who were once quiet remain silently by your side in times of adversity. This difference needs no explanation. The heart understands it on its own. The ancients taught that the most valuable person is one who does not change their mind when their interests change. When there is profit, they do not flatter. When profit is lost, they do not turn their back. This kind of steadfastness is rare, and precisely because it is rare, it only becomes apparent when the challenges are great enough. In times of gain and loss, people also look back at themselves with their hearts. They examine how they have lived, how they have treated others, whether they have been close to others for personal gain or distant from others for personal gain. Adversity not only scrutinizes others, but also examines oneself, forces people to confront the truth whether they want to or not. The ancients did not view adversity as a bad thing. They saw it as an opportunity for purification. When profit prevails, everything becomes chaotic. When profit is lost, artificial relationships crumble. What remains, though few, is genuine. Judging people with the heart also means judging them through accumulated experience, no longer rushing to conclusions, no longer believing in empty words, but believing in actions that have been proven over time. The heart is no longer guided by fleeting emotions, but by mature understanding. Ancient people were very cautious when forming relationships, but once they saw things with their hearts, they were very steadfast. As their hearts had seen clearly, they were not easily swayed or changed. That is why relationships that endure through adversity are often very deep. They don't need many words, but they are very strong. In modern life, this saying still holds true. When you're at the top, you're surrounded by many people. When you face difficulties, that circle shrinks. But within that smaller circle, you'll clearly see who the real people are. Not to blame anyone, but to understand the underlying principles. The ancients taught that understanding this will lighten the heart. Don't resent when someone leaves. Don't be overly joyful when someone arrives. Just acknowledge them. And maintain a calm demeanor, because everyone has their own choices, and adversity only reveals those choices. Judging people with a discerning eye also helps us become less harsh, because once we understand, we are no longer surprised, no longer shocked, and no longer place our expectations in the wrong places. We know that when profit is at stake, everything is merely a condition. When profit is lost, that's when the true nature of things is revealed. The ancients summarized it profoundly. To truly know a person, don't look at them when they are gaining something. Look at them when they have nothing left to gain. At that time, their heart will guide their actions. And once a person's heart is revealed, there's no need to ask further questions. This saying isn't meant to make people suspicious, but rather to make them clear-headed. Clear-headed so they don't have illusions when things are going well, and don't despair when things are going badly. Most importantly, to learn how to be a person so that, whether gaining or losing, they can still look back at themselves with a clear conscience without feeling ashamed. 2. Adversity is the clearest mirror reflecting character and loyalty. This saying isn't meant to make people pessimistic, but rather to help them see life more deeply, see people more clearly, and see themselves more honestly. Our ancestors understood very early on that only when life pushes people into difficult situations do their outer layers fall away, and their true nature is revealed. In favorable circumstances, character is easily obscured by good fortune. A person might be generous when they have plenty. They might be kind when they don't have to sacrifice. Might be respectful when their interests aren't threatened. These are commendable qualities, but they are not enough to judge a person's character, as it hasn't been tested. The ancients didn't use easy times to gauge people's character. They used difficult times, because they understood that adversity forces people to choose between holding on and letting go, between advancing and retreating, between protecting oneself and protecting others. These choices cannot be faked for long. and it is there that character begins to emerge. Adversity is like a large mirror. It doesn't reflect outward appearances, but rather the depths of one's inner self. When loss occurs, when benefits disappear, when pressure weighs heavily, people will reveal what they consider most important. Some prioritize integrity, some prioritize profit, some prioritize morality, and some only prioritize self-preservation. In human relationships, loyalty is also revealed in adversity. When everything is abundant, loyalty is easily confused with convenience. We meet because we are happy, compatible, and mutually beneficial. But when difficulties arise, who stays, who leaves, who remains silent, and who speaks up, all of these speak volumes. The ancients taught that a truly valuable person is not someone who appears in times of joy, but someone who doesn't disappear in times of sorrow. Not everyone is capable of helping, but their attitude in times of difficulty is a testament to their willingness to help. A sincere inquiry, a timely presence, sometimes these are worth far more than promises made in times of prosperity. Adversity also reveals character through how people treat those weaker than themselves. When under pressure, a person with strong character maintains basic kindness. They don't vent their anger on others. They don't hurt others to alleviate their insecurities. This is very difficult, and because it's difficult, it only becomes apparent in adversity. The ancients observed this very carefully. They found that truly virtuous people, when faced with difficulties, speak less about themselves. They focus on maintaining inner peace and proper conduct. Even when their hearts are turbulent, they do not allow those turbulent emotions to harm others. That is the level of long-term self-cultivation. Conversely, adversity also exposes fragile personalities. When things go wrong, some become bitter. When things don't go their way, some are ready to break principles. When pressured, some quickly turn their backs on relationships once considered loyal and affectionate. These things are nothing new, but only when they happen do people truly believe them. Loyalty in adversity doesn't need to be ostentatious. It's often quiet. One person stays, even if they can't offer much help, but doesn't leave. Another maintains respect, even when there's no longer a shared interest. These small things, when viewed in the light of adversity, shine brighter than any vow. The ancients once said that adversity does not create character. It only reveals what is already present. A person who values righteousness will understand it more clearly when faced with difficulties. A person who values profit will understand profit more clearly when faced with difficulties. Because the veil is gone, and the mind guides the actions. Adversity is also a time for self-reflection. It's not just looking at others, but examining where one stands in those mirrors. Are you staying or leaving? Are you holding on or letting go? Are you maintaining your principles when challenged? These questions are not easy to answer, but they are essential. Ancient people viewed adversity as a great lesson not to teach others, but to teach themselves. Those who understand this lesson will be less resentful of life and others and will focus more on cultivating their own character. Because they understand that at some point adversity will come again, and when that happens, the only thing that will stand firm is one's character. Friendship is the same. Not everyone we were close to will stand by us through difficult times. But those who have been with us through difficult times, their friendship is very deep. No need for many words, no need for promises. Just remember and cherish them. Adversity helps people rearrange their relationships. Relationships based on self-interest will naturally fall apart. Relationships based on shared values will be preserved. This process can be painful, but it's necessary because it helps people feel lighter, less delusional, and live more authentically. Our ancestors did not shy away from adversity. They prepared for it by cultivating character from an early age. They understood that when the waves come, no one has time to learn to swim. The same is true for character. It is built up during ordinary times, so that when the extraordinary happens, people do not lose themselves. Adversity also reveals who can be trusted in the long term. It's not the eloquent speaker, but the one who maintains a consistent character. Regardless of changing circumstances or the loss of benefits, that stability creates a sense of security, and security is the foundation of all lasting relationships. The ancients viewed adversity as a fair test. It shows no favoritism, no distinction between rich and poor, and no concern for reputation. Everyone must go through it, and everyone will leave their mark on it. That mark is not in words, but in actions. Once you understand this, you won't be so disappointed when you see someone change in adversity, because it's just a reflection, not betrayal, but a return to their true self. Understanding this, your heart will feel lighter, and your mind will be more steadfast. Adversity is a mirror, but that mirror isn't for judgment. It's for reflection. Reflection to know. It's knowing to choose. Choosing people. Choosing a way of life. And most importantly, choosing how to be a person, so that when we stand before that mirror, we don't have to turn away. 3. Winning hearts and minds in adversity begins with not abandoning others first. This is something the ancients particularly valued, because in times of difficulty, people don't need more promises or grand plans. What they need most is to know that they are not being left behind, not being turned away when their value temporarily diminishes. In good times, being together is easy, sharing benefits, celebrating together, saying nice things together. When adversity arises, when benefits diminish, when risks increase, when the future becomes uncertain, staying together becomes a costly choice. And that choice reveals character very clearly. The ancients understood that what people fear most is not poverty, but being abandoned when they are weak. A person can endure material deprivation, but it is very difficult to bear the feeling of betrayal, of being forgotten, of being treated as a burden. Therefore, in adversity, the act of not abandoning others is the deepest foundation for winning people's hearts. Not abandoning someone doesn't mean rescuing them at all costs. It doesn't mean bearing all their burdens for them. Our ancestors didn't teach blind sacrifice. They taught us to uphold righteousness, to maintain our presence, to never turn our backs. Sometimes, simply not disappearing, not remaining coldly silent, not washing our hands of it, that makes a huge difference. In adversity, people observe very carefully. They don't listen to words, but look at reactions. When a crisis occurs, who stays? Who avoids the situation? Who maintains respect? Who starts calculating the pros and cons? These things don't need to be asked. Time and circumstances will provide the answers. The ancients said that a trustworthy person is not someone who says they won't leave, but someone who doesn't leave when there's no longer a reason to stay. Because when there's still a benefit, staying might be a trade-off. But when the benefit is gone, staying becomes a choice of character. Winning hearts and minds in adversity begins very early. It starts in small things. When others are in trouble, do we quickly distance ourselves? When others are down on their luck, do we change our attitude? When there is no longer a common good, do we still maintain basic kindness? These small things accumulate to form a big image in people's hearts. The ancients particularly warned against abandoning something too soon. A single turning away in a difficult moment can erase years of hard work. Trust doesn't crumble because of one major mistake, but because at the moment others need it most, we choose our own safety first. Not abandoning others in adversity is also a way to protect yourself, because those you've been there for during difficult times will not forget. They may not say it or make promises, but they've acknowledged it in their hearts. And when times change, that acknowledgement becomes the foundation of lasting friendship. The ancients had a far-sighted vision. They understood that life isn't always about being at the top. Today you might be strong, tomorrow you might be weak. Today you might help others, tomorrow you might need their help. But what's most important isn't the exchange, but consistent behavior when others are at their lowest point. In adversity, not abandoning others is also demonstrated by not blaming, not shifting pressure, and not pushing others forward as scapegoats. People with strong character will find ways to hold on to others when things get tough. Those lacking strength will try to abandon them when things get difficult. And that difference needs no explanation. It speaks for itself through its consequences. There are people who can't offer much help. They don't leave. They stay in touch. They maintain respect. They treat the other person the same as before. It is this unchanging attitude that creates a great sense of security. Security is the rarest thing in adversity. Ancient wisdom holds that winning people's hearts doesn't lie in doing great things when things are going well, but in refraining from doing bad things when things are difficult. Don't add burdens. Don't add hurt. Don't add feelings of betrayal. Just maintain that, and people's hearts will naturally lean towards you. Not abandoning others also requires courage. Because in adversity, staying means enduring pressure, taking risks, and facing skeptical glances. Not everyone has the courage. But precisely because it's difficult, it's valuable. And precisely because few people can do it, those who can will be very different. The ancients discouraged wide-ranging friendships. They advised deep friendships. And the depth of a relationship is only measured in adversity. Whoever walks with you through difficult times deserves to walk with you for the long haul. Winning hearts and minds in adversity isn't a tactic, but a consequence of one's way of life. Those who live with integrity will naturally not abandon others when faced with difficulties. Those who are self-serving will naturally withdraw when faced with hardship. No need for extensive analysis, just observe their behavior. Some relationships break down not because of misunderstandings, but because one person leaves too soon. In such cases, no matter how much explanation is given later, the rift remains. Because the person who is abandoned has learned a lesson that when times are tough, they can only rely on themselves. The ancients placed great importance on the concept of staying put. Staying put wasn't about interfering too deeply, but about providing spiritual support, letting others know they weren't alone. And that alone was enough. People's hearts had a place to cling to. In adversity, there are two kinds of silence. One is silence of companionship. The other is silence of avoidance. A discerning person can distinguish them. A wounded person can also distinguish them. Who is truly there and who is merely watching from afar. Winning hearts and minds over the long term doesn't come from promises made when things are going well. It comes from quiet choices made during difficult times. The choice to stay. The choice not to abandon. The choice to retain people before pursuing profit. These choices aren't flashy, but they are profound. The ancients taught that if you want to know if a person is trustworthy, look at them in adversity. If you want to become a trustworthy person, practice not abandoning others first. Even if only through your presence, even if only through an unwavering attitude. When you don't abandon others when they are weak, you are sowing a very strong seed. It may not sprout immediately, but given enough time, it will become belief. And that belief doesn't need to be promoted. It spreads on its own. Winning hearts and minds in adversity isn't about doing a lot. It's about not doing one thing, not turning your back, not washing your hands of it, not disappearing. That's all it takes. It's far more important than any eloquent words or beautiful rhetoric. If you've ever experienced adversity and understand the value of not being abandoned, please share this video with those who have stayed by your side. And don't forget to subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to learn together how to live a more meaningful, rooted, and sustainable life amidst life's challenges. 4. When you yourself are in trouble, how you treat those weaker than you reveals who you are. Ancient wisdom considers this a very accurate measure of character, because when a person is deprived, oppressed, or hurt, all outer layers crumble away. What remains is the true root of a person. In good times, everyone can be generous. Everyone is quick to speak kindly. Everyone is willing to help when it doesn't affect them. But when they themselves are struggling, when resources are limited, when they are anxious, when the future is uncertain, then every small action carries immense weight. And especially, how you treat those weaker than yourself reveals what kind of person you are. The ancients understood that adversity not only tests resilience, but also tests character. When faced with difficulties, some become more humble, more compassionate, and more righteous. But others become bitter, easily angered, and prone to venting their frustration on those less fortunate. This difference creates a clear line between those with roots and those without. The weaker person might be someone under your authority, someone dependent, someone incapable of resistance, someone who needs you. 8. During difficult times, if you maintain respect, avoid blaming. 8. Don't vent your anger, and don't use your meager power to hurt them. That's a sign of a strong character. Conversely, if, when faced with difficulties, you become irritable, nitpicky, coercive, or contemptuous of the weaker person, that's when your true ego is revealed. The ancients said that truly strong people don't need to prove their strength by hurting others. It's those who are weak inside who need to oppress others to feel powerful. Therefore, when you yourself are in trouble, the way you treat those weaker than you is the way you soothe your own insecurities, either through kindness or through coercion. In many relationships, people's feelings change not because of a major event, but because of very small moments during difficult times. A harsh word, a cold attitude, an act of disrespect. These things, if they happen when things are going well, might be overlooked. But if they happen when the other person is also vulnerable, worried, or afraid, the wound will be very deep. Ancient people placed particular importance on maintaining righteousness and integrity in times of hardship. They understood that adversity is when evil thoughts are most likely to arise. When resources are scarce, greed easily arises. When fear prevails, selfishness easily sets in. When threatened, cruelty easily sets in. If in such circumstances you can still maintain moral boundaries and refrain from harming those weaker than yourself, that demonstrates a very high level of self-cultivation. Some people, when faced with difficulties, immediately withdraw and only focus on protecting themselves. It's understandable. But the opposite of protection is causing harm. The ancients didn't ask for more help than one could offer. They only asked not to make things worse, not to shift the burden onto the weak, and not to use one's own insecurity as an excuse to hurt others. How you treat those weaker than yourself when you're in trouble also reveals how you view power. Some people see power as a responsibility, so the more difficult the situation, the more restrained they become. Others see power as a tool for venting anger, so the more difficult the situation, the easier it is to abuse it. And those around you will remember this very clearly, even if they don't say it out loud. In a group setting, people might accept your temporary lack of competence. They might accept your failure. It's very difficult to accept you becoming bitter when faced with difficulties, because bitterness creates insecurity. And when insecurity is present, people will naturally withdraw. No need to object, no need to argue. They simply no longer want to be near you. Ancient wisdom holds that true character lies not in your position at the top, but in your state when you are brought down. When at the top, everyone is polite. When at the bottom, only those who can maintain their kindness are truly valuable. For kindness in adversity doesn't come from excess, but from inner strength. There are people who, when facing difficulties, treat those weaker than themselves better, not because they have more, but because they understand the feeling of being hurt. That empathy softens their hearts. When you meet such people, it's easy to win their hearts, because everyone feels safe, knowing that if one day they become weak, they won't be trampled on. Conversely, some people, when faced with difficulties, start nitpicking, begin to force things, and begin to use words to exert pressure. These behaviors may provide a temporary sense of control, but in the long run, they quickly destroy the foundation of the relationship. The weaker party may remain silent, but inwardly, they have already drawn their own conclusions. The ancients taught that to know if a person is trustworthy, observe them when they are down on their luck. And to know if a person is worth following, observe them when they are in trouble. Those who remain kind and compassionate in the face of hardship can go the distance. Those who show cruelty in the face of adversity will sooner or later find solitude. The way you treat those weaker than you when you're in trouble is also the way you teach others how to treat you in the future. If you choose kindness, you're setting a standard. If you choose to be domineering, you're setting a different standard. And when the roles are reversed, that standard will come back to haunt you. Ancient people didn't believe in self-proclaimed morals. They only observed behavior in adversity, because at that time, there weren't many choices. There weren't many layers of disguise. People were forced to live true to their roots. And it was then that who you are will become very clear. In the journey of winning hearts and minds, it's not success that matters, but failure. It's not abundance that's important, but scarcity. If when faced with hardship you can still maintain respect for those weaker than yourself, you not only preserve your character, but also win people's hearts. And that is something irreplaceable. 5. Wise people don't test others by deliberately cutting off their gains. Instead, they observe how people react when their gains are naturally lost. This is a profound observation by the ancients about human psychology and a correct way to judge people. Testing someone by intentionally inflicting loss often distorts their true nature, while natural adversity reveals the truth. Ancient wisdom discourages deliberately taking away others' benefits to test their loyalty. When tested, people often react instinctively, defensively. They may become angry, wary, or behave unnaturally. In such cases, what you see isn't necessarily their true nature, but rather their reaction to a hurtful act. Wise people understand that people don't like being put in a position of doubt. When you deliberately cut corners to test someone, you're implicitly sending a message that you don't trust them. And when trust is questioned, the relationship is damaged before any conclusions can be drawn. The ancients called this testing in the wrong place, losing a person before you truly understand them. Conversely, when benefits are lost due to circumstances, the times, or unforeseen changes, people's reactions will be much more genuine, because at that moment, they are not facing a test, but reality. And how they choose to behave in reality is the clearest answer. Ancient people observed that when gains are lost, some remain calm, without resentment, without changing their tone, without calculating gains and losses. Others begin to compare, complain, blame, or even turn their backs. These reactions need no explanation, no questioning. They speak volumes about the nature of each individual. Wise people, therefore, don't need to create situations to test themselves. They just need to be alert enough to observe when the situation arises naturally. Life is full of changes. There are countless times when advantages diminish, power weakens, and positions waver. And in those times, people's true nature will be revealed. Ancient wisdom also warns that those who frequently test others' loyalty are often insecure. They fear betrayal and exploitation, so they try to control the situation by creating challenges. However, this very action can worsen the relationship, as no one likes being forced to prove their sincerity. Wise people choose a different approach. They don't ask others what they would do if they lost their profit. They wait to see what others do when the profit is truly gone. Because spontaneous action is always more genuine than forced action, and it is the attitude when the profit is no longer there that is truly sustainable. In relationships, many breakdowns don't stem from the loss of profit, but from how people behave when that profit is lost. Some people lose profit, but still maintain their integrity. Others lose even a small portion of their profit and lose their character completely. The ancients didn't need to judge with words. They simply remembered and adjusted their distance. Wise people don't jump to conclusions when things are going well. They know that when things are favorable, it's easy to be kind, easy to say nice things, easy to show loyalty. But when the benefits disappear, when there's no longer any external motivation, only then will behavior reflect inner motives. Ancient people placed particular importance on naturalness, because what is natural is often difficult to fake. When gains and losses go unnoticed, unjudged, and unexpected, people will live true to their roots. And that is when wise people observe. There are people who, when faced with loss or gain, become more withdrawn and less talkative, but their attitude towards those around them remains unchanged. They accept their circumstances, don't blame others, and don't cause trouble for anyone. Such people often possess inner strength, and the ancients greatly valued them. Conversely, there are people who, when faced with a loss, immediately change their behavior, becoming cold, irritable, or recalculating the relationship. These changes don't need a reason. The answer is already there, and wise people simply observe them quietly. The ancients also taught that one should not blame others when they reveal their true nature during times of gain or loss. That is natural. Not everyone has the foundation to maintain composure when there's no longer any benefit. The important thing is not to judge, but to understand and choose the appropriate way to respond. Wise people, therefore, do not harbor resentment, anger, or excessive disappointment. They simply adjust their expectations. Those who maintain integrity when profit is lost deserve to go further. Those who change too quickly should only go a short distance. No need to cut ties completely. Just put things in the right place. Testing someone's character by cutting their gums is dangerous because it can create unnecessary rifts. A person might be inherently good, but when tested, they feel offended, doubted, and distance develops. In that case, you don't lose them because they're bad, but because of how you perceive them. Ancient people strongly discouraged creating events to test others. They believed that time and circumstances would take care of that. Human beings needed to be patient and observant enough to learn from experience. There was no need to rush. There was no need for manipulation. Wise people understand that they themselves will eventually be observed. Their own interests are compromised. Others are watching how they react. Therefore, they are even more cautious in their attitude, not to put on a show, but to maintain their integrity. When self-interest is lost, that's when there's nothing left to cling to. A person is left with only themselves. And the way they stand in that moment is the clearest portrait. No words can replace it. The ancients said that to know if a person is trustworthy in the long run, don't look at them when they receive something. Look at them when it's taken away. But not by your own hands, but by letting life take it away itself. Then every reaction will be genuine. Wise people don't rush. They let time filter them. Let circumstances test them. Let people's true nature be revealed. And it is this non-interference that helps them judge people much more accurately. Ultimately, the wisdom of the ancients lies in not forcing the truth. It's not coercing people's hearts and not creating artificial challenges. They believe that life is inherently full of challenges, and that anyone who cannot remain steadfast when faced with loss will sooner or later be exposed. Wise people simply observe, take note, and live within their own bounds. That's enough to understand others, and enough to avoid being drawn into experiments that hurt one another. 6. In adversity, words become cheap. Actions become expensive. This is something the ancients observed very carefully about human nature when faced with difficulties. Because when everything collapses, when safety is gone, when benefits disappear, words lose much of their value. What remains for people to cling to is concrete action. In favorable times, words are easy. Anyone can promise, anyone can encourage, anyone can say beautiful things. But adversity reveals a truth. Words have no price, but actions do. It is precisely because of this price that actions taken in adversity become so precious. Ancient wisdom holds that in times of difficulty, people should not listen to their ears, but observe their eyes. They should not heed words, but observe actions. A kind word cannot alleviate worry. A beautiful promise cannot lessen pressure, but a small, timely action can completely change a person's feelings. In adversity, everyone is tired. Everyone is worried. Everyone is trying to protect themselves. Therefore, even words spoken with good intentions are easily doubted. People no longer have the energy to analyze whether the words are true or false. They only look to see if the other person will do anything, stay, or share the burden. The ancients said that words spoken in adversity often mask a lack of action. When someone talks too much in difficult times, it's very likely because they can't do anything. Conversely, those who act usually speak less, not because they have nothing to say, but because they understand that action is what's needed. Action in adversity becomes costly because it demands sacrifice time, effort, reputation, safety, or personal opportunity. Not everyone is willing to pay that price. Therefore, every action taken during difficult times carries immense weight in the eyes of those who witness it. Sometimes, just a small act, a timely presence, a willingness to stand by others is enough to leave a lasting impression, because in adversity, every act of support becomes precious, and people will remember clearly who did it and who only spoke. The ancients placed particular importance on acting in silence. No ostentation, no boasting, no repetition. Because in times of difficulty, people don't need to know how much you sacrificed. You only need to know that you didn't abandon them, and that alone is enough to create profound trust. Conversely, there are words spoken in adversity that, while seemingly kind, can hurt more. Phrases like "cheer up," "it'll be all right," or "I understand," if not accompanied by action, often leave the listener feeling even more alone. They realize the other person is only offering comfort from the sidelines, not truly sharing the same experience. The ancients did not deny the value of words. They understood very well their place. Words only have value when they follow action. If there is no action, words become insignificant, even a burden, because they create expectations that are not met. In adversity, people don't need to hear how skilled you are, how you analyze right and wrong, or your long-term plans. What they need is action now, however small, however imperfect, but genuine. The ancients judged people in adversity in a very simple way. Who will still work when no one asks them to? Who will still take responsibility when no one is supervising? Who will still keep their promises when there is no longer any benefit? Such actions don't need publicity. They spread on their own. Action in adversity cannot be faked for long. A person might be able to act once, but it's very difficult to maintain that act over a long, difficult period. Because action requires energy, and genuine energy will be depleted if it doesn't originate from the root. The ancients taught that when faced with adversity, speak less and do a little more. Not for the sake of gaining fame, but to maintain relationships. Because in difficult times, a small action can save a relationship, while a wrong word can ruin everything. Some relationships break down not because no one says kind words, but because no one is willing to do what needs to be done. Conversely, some relationships become very strong simply because, during a difficult period, someone silently shouldered a part of the burden. In adversity, action becomes valuable because it makes a stark difference. Who just talks, who acts, who disappears, who stays. No need to ask, no need to confront. Time will sort out each person's place. Ancient people did not value vows made in times of hardship, because they knew that vows are often born from emotion, while actions stem from character. Emotions are changeable, but character is more enduring. When you act in adversity, you're not only helping others, you're also building your own image. An image that doesn't need advertising, but will be spread by word of mouth for a long time. And that image is the foundation of trust. Conversely, when you only talk without acting, you are also building a different image of empty comfort. And in the heart of someone who is struggling, that image holds little value. The ancients said that in times of turmoil, whoever can hold on to their position is the pillar of the community. They don't need to be more skilled than anyone else. They just need to not abandon their work, their people, or their responsibilities. That's enough to unite people's hearts. In adversity, words become cheap. Not because they are bad, but because there are so many of them. Everyone talks. Everyone promises. Everyone explains. But action is rare. And rarity always comes at a price. Winning hearts and minds in adversity doesn't require eloquent words. Just do your part correctly, consistently, and persistently. When others see that, they will understand on their own. You don't need to say anything. If you've ever experienced adversity and realized the value of action over words, please share this video with someone who has done something for you during difficult times. And don't forget to subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to continue learning together how to live a more meaningful and trustworthy life amidst life's challenges. 7. The ancients taught that keeping one's word is more valuable in difficult times than in easy times. This is not just general moral advice, but a profound observation about the nature of trust and human character. Keeping one's word when things are going smoothly doesn't require much courage, but keeping one's word when circumstances are against you is where true character is put to the test. When life is easy, when resources are abundant, when benefits are plentiful, keeping promises is natural. It's even beneficial, because keeping one's word then improves one's image, expands relationships, creates more opportunities. But precisely because it's beneficial, the value of trustworthiness isn't truly high then. It's more like a convenient choice than a sacrifice. The ancients understood that trustworthiness only truly carries weight when it goes against immediate self-interest. Keeping a promise means suffering a loss. Breaking a word means incurring a penalty. Doing what is right means facing greater difficulties. It is in these moments that trustworthiness reveals its true value. In times of hardship, people easily find excuses. Difficult circumstances, immense pressure, no other choice, everyone understands. These reasons sound plausible, and society is usually sympathetic. But the ancients didn't look at the reasons. They looked at the choices. Because reasons only explain circumstances, while choices reflect character. Keeping one's word in difficult times isn't because there are no other options, but because one chooses not to do wrong, even if it means doing so. It is this voluntary choice that makes trustworthiness so valuable. Those who keep their word in difficult times understand the price they will pay, but they still accept it. Because they value something greater than short-term gain, stability in their character. The ancients taught that trustworthiness is like the roots of a tree. When the roots are strong, the tree can withstand strong winds. When the roots are weak, even a single gust of wind is enough to uproot it. Keeping one's word when things are easy is like tending the leaves. Keeping one's word when things are difficult is like protecting the roots. There are people who, when faced with difficulties, begin to change their words, delay commitments, adjust agreements, or quietly withdraw. They don't think they've done anything wrong because they believe circumstances force them to. But in the eyes of others, the image has changed. Not because of one major mistake, but because of a single instance of inconsistency. The ancients were very perceptive in observing this. They didn't blame those who failed, nor did they criticize those who were weak. But they remembered very clearly who kept their word when things were no longer favorable, and who changed their minds when their interests wavered. This remembrance was subtle, but enduring, and it greatly determined many relationships later on. Keeping one's word during difficult times is even harder because there's no guarantee of reward. When things are going well, keeping one's word usually comes with rewards, trust, new opportunities, recognition. But when things are tough, keeping one's word may not yield immediate results. It might even worsen the situation in the short term. Because there's no guarantee of profit, very few people manage to do it. The ancients called such people pillars of strength. They may not be outstanding, quick-witted, or resourceful, but they are people who stand firm. And in a world full of changes, those who stand firm are always rare and precious. Some relationships only truly endure through difficult times. And during those times, trustworthiness is what shines brightest. A promise kept when there's no longer any benefit carries more weight than 10 promises kept when everything is going smoothly. The ancients also emphasized that keeping one's word in difficult times doesn't require ostentation, boasting, or repeating oneself. Its value lies not in being immediately recognized, but in being remembered for a long time, remembered through experience, not through mere recounting. Those who keep their word in times of difficulty often don't talk much. They know that speaking out won't lessen the hardship. They choose to act in silence. And it is this silence that creates a sense of security for those around them, making them feel that this is someone they can rely on not in easy times, but in difficult times. The ancients also warned that breaking a promise during difficult times causes far deeper harm than breaking it during easy times. Because when things are tough, people are in a vulnerable state. Betrayal, a broken promise, can completely shatter any remaining trust. And once trust is shattered, it is very difficult to rebuild. Some believe that being practical means being flexible, but the ancients clearly distinguished between flexibility and dishonesty. Flexibility means changing the way things are done, not the fundamentals. Dishonesty means changing the fundamentals to protect one's own interests. And that boundary is most clearly demonstrated in adversity. Keeping your word during difficult times is also a way to protect yourself in the long run, because reputation isn't built from a single action, but from a series of consistent actions. Keeping your word during a difficult time might not bring immediate benefits, but it lays the foundation for many opportunities later on. Opportunities that don't come from advertising, but from quiet recommendations. Ancient people believed that a trustworthy person is like someone with a personal mark. They don't need much explanation. They don't need constant proof. Just mentioning their name is enough to reassure others. And that reassurance cannot be bought with words. In adversity, many things can be lost. Money, status, power, relationships. But if you maintain your integrity, you preserve your foundation. And as long as your foundation remains, everything else can be rebuilt. Conversely, if you lose your integrity for the sake of profit, even if you overcome the immediate difficulties, the path ahead will become increasingly narrow. The ancients had a far-sighted vision. They didn't ask how much profit they made today, but who would still be by their side tomorrow. And the answer lies in whether trustworthiness is maintained during difficult times. Not in words, but in concrete actions. Keeping one's word during difficult times is also a form of self-cultivation. It requires controlling fear, greed, and inner insecurity. Those who can do this not only maintain people's trust, but also preserve their own peace of mind, because they don't live with feelings of regret or fear of being betrayed. The ancients once said that those who keep their word may go slowly in difficult times, but they will go very far. Those who abandon their word to go fast may get ahead a bit, but sooner or later they will lose their way, because no one will truly trust them when the test comes again. Ultimately, keeping your word in difficult times isn't about becoming a saint, but about becoming someone who can hold their head high. Looking back, there's no shame, no need for excuses, No need to console yourself with reasons. Just know that in the most difficult times, you didn't choose the easiest path, but the right one. That is the deepest value of trustworthiness that our ancestors wanted to pass down. It's not for the sake of praise, but for standing firm. It's not for the sake of being better than others, but for not losing oneself. 8. Those who keep their promises when the benefits are gone maintain lasting goodwill. This saying may sound simple, but it contains a profound truth about human nature that our ancestors observed for hundreds of years. Promises are never lacking in life, but keeping them after the benefits have vanished is extremely rare. When there is still profit to be gained, promises are often driven by motives. Keeping promises helps maintain image, relationships, and opportunities. Many people keep their promises very exemplary during this period, not because they are bad people, but because circumstances are favorable for doing good. At that time, keeping promises has almost no cost and may even be profitable. But precisely because of this, trustworthiness hasn't been truly tested yet. Ancient people didn't rush to judge a person while they still had advantages. They waited. They waited until the advantages were gone, when the promise yielded nothing more or even caused harm. Only then did a person's actions clearly reflect their true nature. Because there were no longer external reasons to force them, all choices came from within. Those who keep their promises when there is no longer any benefit to them prioritize integrity over short-term calculations. They understand that benefits can be lost and then regained, but trust, once lost, is very difficult to restore. They break their promises not out of fear of being blamed, but because they don't want to break their own principles. In the eyes of the ancients, such a person has roots. Its roots here are not money, not power, but consistency in their conduct. A person with roots can withstand change, because no matter how circumstances change, they maintain an inner straight line. They don't deviate due to pressure, nor do they bend for personal gain. Human nature also operates according to that same principle. People may be attracted by talent, by benefits, by eloquent words, but they only stay with those who make them feel secure. And that security doesn't come from beautiful promises, but from real-life experience. That even when the benefits are gone, this person still keeps their word. Some relationships only truly begin when the benefits end. While the partnership is profitable, everything runs smoothly. But when profits decrease, when circumstances change, when there's nothing left to share, that's when it becomes clear who stays, who quietly withdraws, and who remains true to their word. The ancients were very perceptive in observing this detail. They didn't need others to help them further. They just needed them not to turn their backs on them. They didn't need others to give them more. They just needed them not to break their promises. For them, a person who doesn't break their word when there's no longer any benefit is someone who can go the distance. Those who keep their word when there's no longer a benefit often suffer losses, might lose money, time, or other opportunities. Sometimes they might even be seen as naive or lacking foresight. But the ancients saw further. They knew that such people would naturally win people's hearts. No advertising needed, no image building required. People's hearts would find them on their own. Because everyone fears one thing more than anything: being abandoned when they are no longer valuable. When you meet someone who keeps their word even when you are no longer beneficial, a strong sense of security emerges. And once that feeling forms, it is more enduring than any contract or written agreement. A good heart is not something that can be bought. It can only be given, only to those who can prove that they will not change when their interests shift. Keeping a promise once when there is no longer any benefit carries more weight than keeping a promise when everything is going well. The ancients once said that a promise is like a bridge. When there is profit, both sides stand on the bridge, so no one will break it. But when the profit is gone, if one side still holds the bridge, the other will remember it for life. Because even when there was no need to keep it, that person still held on. Those who keep their word when there is no longer a benefit to be gained usually don't need much explanation, don't justify themselves. They don't boast. They don't seek recognition. They simply do what they said they would do. And it is this quietness that makes others trust them more deeply, because there is no motive for showing off. The ancients also recognized that lasting human loyalty doesn't come from those who are overly clever, but from those who are stable. Stable in words, stable in actions, stable both in good times and bad. Such people may not bring great benefits immediately, but they provide a sense of security. And it is this sense of security that makes people stay. Some people are very good at the beginning. They make many promises, work quickly, and create early benefits. But when the benefits diminish, they change their attitude, break their promises, or quietly disappear. These people may achieve quick results, but rarely retain customer loyalty for long. Because each time the benefits are lost, they lose a part of the trust as well. Conversely, those who keep their word when there is no longer any benefit may progress slowly, but the further they go, the more companions they will find. People are willing to stay with those who don't abandon them when they are no longer valuable. This is the foundation of lasting relationships, both in business and in life. Ancient people believed that the human heart is like water. Water flows to lower ground but stays where it is firm. A person who keeps their word when there is no longer any benefit is a steadfast person. They do not sway because of the wind of profit, nor are they overturned by the waves of difficulty. Water may arrive slowly, but once it gathers, it is very difficult to disperse. Keeping one's word when there is no longer a benefit is also a form of self-discipline. It forces people to confront loss without trying to avoid it. It teaches us that not every right action yields immediate positive results, but right actions always leave a lasting impact. The ancients did not advise people to make blind sacrifices. They only reminded us that before abandoning a promise because it no longer seems beneficial, we should ask ourselves, if we do so, what will we gain and what will we lose? Because there are things that once lost cannot be bought back with any amount of profit. Lasting trust doesn't come from clever calculations, but from unwavering consistency. Anyone who keeps their promise even when there's no longer a benefit to be gained is telling the world they are trustworthy. And in a life full of ups and downs, being trusted by others is the greatest asset of all. The ancients understood this very well, so they didn't rush into deep relationships when the benefits were still abundant. They waited to see who would keep their word when the benefits dried up. And it was those people, though not the most boisterous, who would stay with them the longest. 9. Adversity reveals true character. No need for debate, just observe. This is a profound observation from the ancients about judging people, because in a life of ease, everyone can appear kind, everyone can speak the truth, everyone can behave beautifully. But only when circumstances become difficult, when benefits diminish, when pressure arises, does a person's true nature gradually and naturally emerge. The ancients advised against using words to test one another. There's no need to ask difficult questions, create traps, or argue to determine right from wrong. Words spoken in adversity are often influenced by emotions, fear, and calculation. Arguing at such times only reveals glibness, not character. Conversely, adversity is like a large mirror. It doesn't speak, it doesn't judge, but it reflects very clearly who remains calm, who changes their attitude, who upholds their principles, who is willing to sacrifice others to protect themselves. All of this is revealed through very small, very ordinary actions. When things are going well, people are icily generous, icily share, and icily offer kind words. But when difficulties arise, every action has a cost. Every act of help comes at a price. It is at that moment that people automatically choose what they value most. Some choose to keep their word, some choose to protect their interests, some choose to save face, and some choose to ensure their own safety. No need to ask, just observe. The ancients observed this very subtly. They believed that what people do when cornered is more truthful than what they say when they are well off. Because in favorable circumstances, doing good usually doesn't hurt. But in adversity, doing what is right often hurts. And those who still choose what is right have strong roots. Adversity also reveals how a person treats others. When they themselves face difficulties, some become irritable, quick to blame, and easily vent their frustration on those weaker than themselves. Others withdraw, remain silent, maintain restraint, and avoid further hurting anyone. This difference doesn't stem from education, but from inner character. Ancient people didn't need to argue about who was right and who was wrong. Arguments only demonstrate the ability to defend one's viewpoint, not the ability to maintain one's integrity. A person might speak eloquently about morality, but when their interests are threatened, they are ready to break everything they said. Conversely, Some people are less talkative, but when circumstances worsen, they maintain a consistent attitude and behave with dignity. It is for these people that adversity speaks for them. Observing in adversity also helps to reveal true friendship. When there is no longer a common interest, who remains, who quietly withdraws, who only appears when there is a benefit, and who is willing to share the difficulties. There's no need to ask for reasons, because reasons are always beautiful. Just look at the actions, because actions are very real. The ancients taught that wise people don't jump to conclusions when things are calm. They wait for storms, not hoping someone will fall, but to see clearly whether the water is deep or shallow. Adversity doesn't make people worse. It only peels away the covering, revealing what is already present within. There are people who, when things are going well, appear very loyal, making promises of lasting commitment and a long-term partnership. But when faced with difficulties, they change their tone, their attitude, and even their manner of address. The ancients did not blame them, because they understood that adversity only reveals the truth, not betrayal. What has changed was never truly stable in the first place. Conversely, there are people who, when things are going well, are very ordinary, unremarkable, and not talkative. But when difficulties arise, they keep their word, maintain their position, and do not turn their backs. Adversity makes these people clearer than ever, and it is at that moment that human hearts begin to bond deeply. Observing ourselves in adversity also helps us understand ourselves. When faced with difficulties, how do we react? Are we easily angered? Are we quick to blame others? Are we willing to sacrifice principles for safety? Or do we maintain an inner balance? There's no need for harsh self-judgment. Just be honest in your reflection, because adversity doesn't lie. Ancient wisdom holds that to know how long someone will stay with you, don't look at their smile, look at their weariness. To know if someone is trustworthy, don't listen to their promises. Look at them when they no longer have a reason to keep their word. These things cannot be measured by argument. They can only be seen through time and circumstances. Adversity also shatters many illusions. When things are going well, it's easy to believe that every relationship is lasting, everyone is good, and everyone understands you. But when difficulties arise, relationships based on temporary self-interest will naturally fall apart. What remains, though few, is genuine, and that genuineness is far more valuable. The ancients were not pessimistic about humanity, they were simply realistic. They knew that not everyone could share their suffering, and that wasn't something to complain about. It was simply a matter of recognizing this and placing one's trust in the right place. That was the wisdom of observation rather than argument. Argument can be hurtful. Observation is not. Argument makes people defensive. Observation allows the truth to reveal itself. The ancients chose the second approach because it is gentle yet profound. No coercion, no confrontation, just quietly observing and then understanding on its own. Adversity, therefore, is not only a challenge, but also an opportunity to observe people, to observe others, and to observe oneself. Those who, after adversity, still maintain kindness, still uphold integrity, and still refrain from harming those weaker than themselves, are truly genuine. No proof is needed, for circumstances have already proven it. The ancients taught that true character is not revealed in applause, but in the silence of hardship. When there is nothing left to say, actions will speak for themselves. When there is no more gain to be gained, choices will speak for themselves. And when there is no more debate, the truth will stand for itself. Therefore, if you want to understand a person, don't rush to argue about right and wrong. Wait and see how they cope with adversity. Observe long enough, calmly, and you won't need to ask any more questions. 10. Those who are willing to suffer losses first in difficult times often retain others. This is a profound insight from the ancients regarding maintaining human relationships amidst adversity. When circumstances become difficult, benefits dwindle, and pressure weighs heavily on everyone, each person tends to prioritize self-preservation. In such situations, those who dare to accept a loss, who dare to step back so that others are not marginalized, often leave a lasting impression. The ancients understood that human relationships are not bound by promises made in times of prosperity, but by memories forged in times of hardship. When everything is sufficient, help is sometimes merely a matter of courtesy. When things are scarce, even a small act of self-sacrifice can become a great act of kindness, because the recipient understands very well that without that sacrifice, they might have been left behind. Accepting losses first doesn't mean being foolish or self-deprecating. The ancients clearly distinguished between accepting losses wisely and accepting them without principles. Accepting losses wisely means understanding the situation, knowing the people involved, and proactively shouldering the difficult burden to maintain the overall situation. Accepting losses without principles, on the other hand, means passively accepting them out of fear, weakness, or the inability to say no. These two things are completely different. In adversity, many relationships break down not because of a lack of money or power, but because of a lack of willingness to share the burden. When everyone tries to protect themselves and pushes the difficulties onto others, coldness spreads quickly. Conversely, if just one person steps forward to take on the burden, the atmosphere immediately changes. Others may not say anything, but they deeply appreciate it. Ancient wisdom holds that people remember the feeling of being protected when they are vulnerable for a very long time. A person might forget how much you helped them when they were wealthy, but it's hard to forget you stood by them when they were about to be abandoned. These memories are not loud or ostentatious, but they become an invisible thread that keeps people connected for a long time. Those who are willing to endure hardship first in difficult times usually don't talk much about their sacrifices. They do it because they feel it's necessary, not for recognition. This very silence gives their actions more weight. Others sense their sincerity, because if it were just acting, they would have said a lot more. In a group, during favorable times, each person's role may sometimes be insignificant. But when difficulties arise, who shoulders the heavy burden, who takes responsibility, and who bears the brunt of the hardship becomes clear. The ancients believed that the person who can retain others until the end is often not the most capable, but the one who ensures others are not left behind the earliest. Being the first to suffer is also the most natural way to test people's character. No need to ask questions, no need to demand reciprocation. Just observe. Who remembers? Who forgets? Who takes it for granted? Who considers it a favor? These reactions help the person who suffered the loss understand very clearly who to hold on to and who to let go of. Without resentment, ancient wisdom discourages sacrificing oneself to gain favor at all costs. Emphasize selectivity, sacrificing for the right people at the right time and to the right degree. When you sacrifice for someone with a conscience, they will remember. When you sacrifice for someone who only cares about their own self-interests, they will take it for granted. This difference only becomes apparent over time. In adversity, those who are willing to take the first hit often create a sense of security for those around them. They send a very clear signal that when difficulties arise, no one will be the first to be sacrificed. This sense of security is the deepest foundation for retaining people. No obligations, no promises, just the knowledge that when trouble comes, you won't be left behind. The ancients understood that people can endure hardship, but the feeling of betrayal is extremely unpleasant. Suffering a loss first is a way to prevent that feeling. It shows that you prioritize the relationship over short-term gain. And when this is demonstrated through actions, not words, it is incredibly persuasive. Those who suffer first during difficult times are often the ones who maintain inner peace. They don't panic, nor do they rush to grab the meager remaining gains. They understand that material possessions can be lost and then recovered, but once human values are lost, they are very difficult to regain. This long-term perspective sets them apart from the majority. When the hardships pass, those who were once sheltered rarely leave easily. Not because of debt, but because they don't want to turn their backs on those who once stood by them. This is a very strong bond, because it's not based on current benefits, but on shared memories. The ancients taught that to retain people, don't just ask what they gained from success. Look at how they felt when they failed. Those who remain in the end are often not the ones who benefited the most, but rather the ones who felt they were treated most fairly when things went wrong. Being willing to suffer a loss first is also a form of self-confidence. Confidence that you can stand firm. Confidence that your value doesn't lie in immediate gains. People lacking self-confidence often fear suffering losses because they fear losing their position. Those with inner strength understand that true standing lies in people's hearts, not in what they receive. Adversity, therefore, is when acts of self-sacrifice prove most valuable. It doesn't need to be much. Just enough to show others that you're not one to turn your back in times of trouble. The ancients believed that just one such instance was enough to lay the foundation for lasting commitment. Ultimately, those who are willing to take a loss during difficult times don't always win immediately. They might lose some benefits, miss an opportunity, or even be misunderstood in the short term. But in the long run, they are usually not alone. When they need help, there will be people there. When they need support, there will be people standing by their side. That is the greatest benefit that taking a loss brings. The ancients saw this very clearly. Maintaining human kindness isn't about always getting the better part, but about daring to take on the difficult tasks when necessary. Those who can do that, even without saying it, will be remembered in people's hearts. And it is those memories that will keep them around long after adversity has passed. 11. The ancients said, "Don't preach morality when others are suffering. Help them get through their hardship first." This is a profound teaching on how to maintain compassion in adversity. Because when people are at the bottom of a difficult situation, their emotions are hurt and anxieties are overwhelming, then all advice, no matter how right, becomes alien. Morality at that time is not a salvation, but sometimes even becomes a burden. Ancient people observed very carefully the human psyche when suffering. When they lose their job, their money, their support system, or fall into despair, what they need most is not to hear about right or wrong, nor to be taught how to be strong. What they need is the feeling of not being abandoned, not being judged, and not having their pain belittled. If you ignore this and rush to preach morality, no matter how eloquent the words, it will be very difficult to touch people's hearts. Winning hearts and minds during times of suffering begins with knowing when to be silent. Silence to listen. Silence to feel. Silence to let the other person know their suffering is being seen. The ancients taught that when a person's heart is troubled, premature words only add to their distress. Actions at this time are what truly matter. Helping others through a difficult time doesn't necessarily mean doing everything for them. Sometimes it's just about sharing a part of the burden, offering practical support, or simply standing by them during their tough times. These actions don't need to be grand, but they must be timely. And timing is the most important thing in adversity. The ancients also understood that speaking of wisdom, when others are suffering, often comes from a position of superiority. The speaker inadvertently places themselves in the position of the knowledgeable, while the listener is in a weaker position. This disparity easily leads to closed hearts. Conversely, when you act to help them through their hardship, you stand on equal footing, sharing their burden. And it is this companionship that builds trust. In reality, many relationships break down not because of a lack of help, but because of an overabundance of advice. Those who suffer don't need to hear how strong you are. They need to know that if they fall, someone will be there to support them. When this sense of security emerges, any moral lessons, if they exist, will then have room to sink in. The story of a leader during a company's downturn is a clear example. When a crisis strikes, revenue drops, and financial pressure mounts, many leaders choose to motivate with words, call for sacrifice, or talk about the future vision. But this leader chose a different approach. He didn't talk much, didn't preach about the shared difficulties, but quietly cut his own salary first, maintaining the minimum wage for the lowest paid employees. This action wasn't publicized, but it quickly spread internally. Employees didn't need him to talk about responsibility because they saw responsibility in his actions. They didn't need him to talk about sharing because they were already receiving it. In the most difficult times, he didn't tell others to sacrifice first, but took the brunt of the hardship himself. The ancients called this winning hearts through exemplary conduct. When a leader is willing to suffer first, those below naturally won't leave, not out of obligation, but because deep down they feel protected, respected, and treated as human beings, not as a cost. As the company gradually overcame the crisis, what was remarkable wasn't the return of profits, but the fact that no one left him. There was no mass resignation, no underlying resentment. Because in everyone's memory, there was a time when they were retained during the most difficult period. And that memory is stronger than any contract. The ancients taught that to retain people in adversity, don't ask if they are loyal, but ask how you treated them when they were at their weakest. A person's true character isn't measured by vows, but by how you felt treated during their time of hardship. Not preaching when others are suffering is also a reminder of humility. No one has the right to stand above another's pain and lecture them. Every suffering has its own weight. And what people need most at that moment is to be acknowledged that their suffering is real and deserves attention. Helping people get through their difficulties first is also a way to lay the foundation for a long-lasting relationship. When the hardship passes, people are in a position to reflect. At that time, any shared experiences and lessons learned, if any, will be appreciated. Our ancestors always placed things in a very clear order, saving people first, then teaching them. In adversity, words become cheap, not because they are untrue, but because they come at the wrong time. Actions become valuable not because they are grand, but because they are rare. Those who dare to act when things are difficult, who dare to bear the losses, who dare to put others before their own interests, always leave a deep impression on people's hearts. Winning hearts and minds, therefore, is not about the skill of speaking correctly, but about the ability to sense correctly, knowing when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to act. The ancients called this wisdom. Wisdom doesn't lie in books, but in sensitivity to the pain of others. If you are in a leadership position, or simply navigating challenging relationships, remember this teaching. When others are suffering, don't rush to preach. Help them through their ordeal first. Just one timely action can win their hearts without saying anything more. If you've ever experienced adversity, or are learning how to keep people when things aren't going well, please share this video with a trusted friend. And subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to learn together how to live resiliently. Keep people and protect yourself amidst life's challenges. 12. Winning hearts and minds in adversity doesn't require generosity. It only requires fairness. This is one of the most insightful teachings of the ancients on how to retain people during difficult times. Because in adversity, resources are often limited, and human strength is restricted. Trying to be excessively generous will not only fail to retain them for long, but will also easily create more instability. The ancients understood very well that what people need most in times of hardship is not favoritism, but to be treated fairly. Fairness in adversity is first and foremost about clarity. Clarity in the distribution of resources, in responsibilities, in rights and obligations. When everything is scarce, ambiguity becomes the seed of discontent. People may accept a small share, but it is very difficult to accept injustice. The ancients taught that if resources are scarce but distributed equally, people's hearts will remain united. If resources are scarce and unbalanced, sooner or later, disintegration will occur. Generosity in good times is often praised, but in difficult times, it can easily be misunderstood.
Nice.
When you give more to one person than another, even with good intentions, you inadvertently create comparisons, suspicion, and feelings of disrespect in others. Fairness helps eliminate these misinterpretations because everyone knows where they stand. Ancient people observed human reactions in adversity very carefully. When benefits diminish, emotions become more sensitive, and self-esteem is more vulnerable. Even a small bias can be magnified into a great injustice. Therefore, fairness is not only a moral principle, but also a strategy for maintaining collective psychological stability. Winning hearts and minds through fairness doesn't require you to have much to give, but rather to have standards to uphold. Those standards must be consistent and apply to everyone, including yourself. When others see that you adhere to the same principles, they will be more accepting of your circumstances. The ancients always emphasized that a leader must not be outside the rules they set. In adversity, many leaders fail not because of a lack of talent, but because of a lack of fairness. They may put in a lot of effort and make many sacrifices, but just one biased decision can quickly shatter previously accumulated trust. The ancients called this losing favor because of a single biased thought. Fairness also means consistency in treatment, not treating people differently because of personal connections, not ignoring those in a vulnerable position, and not showing favoritism because of power. When principles are upheld, people don't need to guess or be on guard, and this very sense of security helps them stay, even when conditions are no longer favorable. The ancients taught that, in times of hardship, people don't demand that you save everyone, but they demand that you don't push them forward as sacrifices. Fairness is the boundary that protects this. When each person feels they are not being unfairly chosen to suffer, they will accept suffering within their means. Winning hearts and minds through fairness is also a way to preserve others' self-respect. Generosity can sometimes make recipients feel indebted or inferior, especially during difficult times. Fairness is different. It keeps each person feeling like they are still an equal part of the community and are still respected. This feeling is more important than any personal gain. Ancient people were very cautious about using favors to keep people in adversity. Favors, if not accompanied by fairness, will create dependence, envy, and ultimately division. Conversely, fairness creates equal standing where everyone shares the burden, the hardship, and overcomes together. In a group setting, when difficulties persist, fairness helps maintain natural discipline. There's no need for excessive supervision or constant reminders, because everyone understands that they are all facing the same challenges. The ancients considered this the foundation of unity, not based on emotion, but on a clear structure. Fairness also helps people distinguish between disadvantages caused by circumstances and disadvantages caused by human actions. When people understand that the difficulties stem from shared circumstances, not from favoritism, they will be less resentful, less prone to blaming, and more focused on overcoming challenges. Winning hearts and minds in adversity, therefore, doesn't require grand gestures or extravagant promises. It simply requires each decision to be explained by a clear principle of fairness. When others see this, they may not be happy, but they understand. This understanding will keep them around longer than fleeting acts of generosity. The ancients said that generosity easily earns gratitude and fairness easily earns trust. In times of prosperity, people remember gratitude. In times of adversity, people need trust that they will not be abandoned, treated unfairly, or sacrificed in vain. Those who uphold justice in adversity often face immense pressure, as not everyone is pleased. But the ancients believed that it's better to endure a bad reputation than to lose face. A bad reputation can be overcome, but lost face is very difficult to regain. Ultimately, fairness in adversity is the most enduring way to maintain human relationships. No ostentation, no fanfare, no need for recognition. But when the difficulties pass, people will remember very clearly who upheld principles, didn't turn black into white when their own interests diminished. The ancients understood this very well. When there is nothing left to give, maintain fairness. When you cannot please everyone, be fair to everyone. Winning hearts and minds doesn't require generosity, only fairness. And it is this fairness that will silently keep people around even during the harshest periods of life. 13. When self-interest is gone, those who still uphold etiquette are those with true character. This is a profound observation from the ancients regarding character in adversity. Etiquette is not merely for decoration during favorable times, but rather a measure of a person's true nature when there's nothing left to gain or lose. Ancient people observed that while self-interest is at stake, etiquette is sometimes merely a formality. People are polite because they still need each other, courteous because they still have expectations, and restrained because of obligations. But when self-interest diminishes, and relationships no longer have any exchange value, then etiquette either disappears or becomes deeply ingrained in a person's character. And it is at this very moment that true character is revealed. People with roots consider etiquette an integral part of themselves, not a tool. They maintain proper conduct not out of fear of offending others, but because it is their inner standard. When they no longer need to curry favor, they do not utter harsh words. When they no longer need to ask for favors, they do not show ingratitude. The ancients called such people those who live by their roots, not by profit. In adversity, many people reveal a noticeable change. When they have advantages, they are gentle. When they lose them, they become cold. When they have power, they are polite. When their power diminishes, they become harsh. This change makes others uneasy, as they don't know who the real person is. Conversely, those who maintain their integrity and propriety throughout, regardless of changing circumstances, create a great sense of stability. In the eyes of the ancients, etiquette was not merely superficial politeness, but rather the proper placement of others. Even when there was no longer any benefit, they still respected past contributions, acknowledged past favors, and maintained moderation in their speech. This shows that they did not use people as tools, nor did they discard them when the tools were no longer valuable. When self-interest is gone, people easily justify their disrespect, saying there's no longer an obligation, that everyone minds their own business. That's just how life is. But the ancients didn't view etiquette as an obligation, but as the root of being human. As long as the roots remain, the tree will stand. If the roots rot, the tree will soon fall, no matter how lush its canopy once was. People with good roots understand that etiquette isn't about keeping people around when needed, but about preventing themselves from becoming heartless. They don't need others to witness it, nor do they need praise, because etiquette is something they demand of themselves. Even when no one is watching, they still won't allow themselves to behave poorly. In relationships, those who maintain decorum when their own interests are no longer at stake are often remembered for a long time. Not because they bring new benefits, but because they leave behind a pleasant and respectable impression. This feeling is rare in adversity, and because it is rare, it is very precious. Ancient people believed that human hearts are not tied to the wisest individuals, but to those who prevent further harm when things are already difficult. A well-chosen word, a measured attitude, when there are no longer any obligations, carries far more weight than kind words spoken when there is still benefit to be gained. People with good roots don't use etiquette to bind others. They don't say, "I've behaved well, so you must remember that." They understand that etiquette is their own responsibility, and how others react is their own. What is this lack of demands that makes their etiquette pure? In adversity, those who uphold propriety are often misunderstood as weak, soft, or incapable of confrontation. However, the ancients believed this was a manifestation of inner strength. Only those with sufficient inner strength do not need to vent their frustrations on others. Only those who are insecure resort to impoliteness as a means of self-defense. When self-interest is gone, maintaining propriety is also a way to secure a way out for oneself, to beg for favors, but so that when looking back, one will not feel ashamed. The ancients highly valued this because they believed that life is long. Relationships may change, but character stays with you throughout your life. People of integrity don't become bitter because of setbacks. They don't slander because they've lost something, and they don't become petty because they've been abandoned. They understand that circumstances may take away benefits, but they shouldn't take away their character. As long as their character remains, they still have a place in people's hearts, even if they no longer have a place in the current game. The ancients taught that to know a person's true character, don't look at their success, but at their failure. If someone maintains their integrity even in the face of failure, they not only possess self-cultivation, but also long-term vision. They wouldn't sacrifice their roots for short-term gratification. In a group setting, those who uphold propriety, when their own interests are no longer at stake, usually remain quiet and unassuming, silently maintaining respect. Others may not side with them at that moment, but they rarely turn their backs completely. Because deep down, everyone can distinguish between those with genuine connections and those who are merely self-serving. Ultimately, when self-interest is no longer at stake, etiquette is the most silent test of character. No one grades you, no one rewards you, but the results are etched in the memories of those around you for a long time. The ancients believed that those who pass this test, whether they go far or near, will never lose their way back into people's hearts. When self-interest is gone, those who still uphold morality are those with roots. Yes. Those roots may not guarantee immediate victory, but they prevent them from falling. And in a life full of uncertainties, not falling is a rare form of unwavering strength. 14. Adversity cannot break relationships built on moral principles. This is something our ancestors observed through countless upheavals in life and times. They understood that what keeps people together for the long term is not self-interest, nor fleeting emotions, but a deeper foundation called morality and righteousness. Ancient people viewed relationships as a multi-layered structure. The outermost layer is self-interest, the middle layer is affection, and the deepest layer is morality. Self-interest can disappear quickly when circumstances change. Affection can fade with accumulated conflict and fatigue. But morality, once formed, is very difficult to break by adversity because it does not depend on external conditions. In the ancients' understanding, morality wasn't about lofty vows, but about consistency in conduct, about being considerate, about refraining from immoral acts, even when given the opportunity. When a relationship is built on such a foundation, adversity only reveals its depth, not enough to break it. Many relationships break down when difficulties arise. Not because the difficulties are too great, but because they were initially bound together by self-interest. While the self-interest remains, everything is smooth. When the self-interest is gone, there's no reason to continue. The ancients considered this a natural dissolution, not regrettable, because the relationship never truly had a foundation in the first place. Conversely, ethical relationships remain strong, even when conditions worsen. There may be less support than before, less frequent meetings, but respect remains, remembrance endures. It's most importantly, no one turns their back or hurts another to save themselves. Adversity is when people easily justify unethical behavior, claiming that circumstances force them, that everyone has to look out for themselves. The ancients did not deny this pressure, but they clearly distinguished between protecting oneself and betraying others. Those who uphold morality may withdraw, may lessen the burden, but they will not push others into a more difficult situation to lighten their own load. In a relationship based on ethics, each party understands the other's limitations in adversity. They don't demand too much, don't force unreasonable sacrifices, and don't use their own difficulties as an excuse for blame. This understanding helps prevent the relationship from breaking down even when conditions are no longer favorable. Ancient people believed that morality created a very special kind of trust. The trust that even if they couldn't help as before, the other person wouldn't harm them. This trust was more important than material assistance because it prevented the relationship from degenerating into hostility when difficulties persisted. Adversity is also when ethical relationships demonstrate their resilience. Grand gestures aren't necessary. Simply maintaining proper communication, a respectful attitude, and appropriate behavior are enough. These seemingly small things have a profound impact on staying connected when everything else seems shaky. The ancients often said that to know if a relationship is morally right, look at how the two parties behave when the ties are broken. If they still maintain decorum, maintain moderation, and refrain from speaking ill of each other behind each other's backs, that is a sign of a deep foundation. Adversity doesn't make people better, but it reveals the inherent nature of their character. Throughout history, many relationships, teacher-student, friendship, ruler-subject have survived through extremely harsh periods. Not because they always benefited from each other, but because they shared a common moral standard. This standard helped them understand the boundaries that could not be crossed, no matter how circumstances pushed them. Moral values also help relationships overcome misunderstandings in adversity. When fundamental trust remains, people are willing to wait, willing to explain, and willing to reflect, instead of hastily jumping to negative conclusions. Ancient wisdom considered this a sign of maturity in a relationship, not weakness. Adversity often comes with hurt, exhaustion, and doubt. Unethical relationships are easily torn apart by these factors. But ethical relationships are like a multi-layered braided rope. It may fray on the outside, but it won't break because many strands hold it together inside. Ancient wisdom teaches that morality and righteousness do not prevent a relationship from facing difficulties, but they help prevent both sides from becoming enemies when things get tough. This is especially important because a relationship that is no longer beneficial but still maintains goodwill remains a healthy relationship. When adversity passes, ethical relationships often don't need much mending. This is because they didn't do anything outrageous during difficult times. There were no deep cuts, there were no words that couldn't be taken back. The ancients believed that maintaining this was already a great success. Ultimately, adversity cannot break a relationship built on moral principles, because morality does not depend on circumstances. It depends on human choice. Each time we uphold morality during difficult times, that foundation grows stronger. And over time, it becomes something that adversity can only test, not destroy. The ancients saw this very clearly. Winning people's hearts for the long term doesn't lie in how much you do for each other, but in doing nothing to each other when there's nothing left to give. If in adversity you still uphold your principles, that relationship will have a long way to go, no matter how life changes. 15. The highest level of understanding is when you are down on your luck and others still don't turn their backs on you. This is what the ancients considered the ultimate measure of human character and morality. Because when you are down on your luck, you no longer have anything to offer, no position to rely on, no ability to provide protection or anything attractive. If in that situation, others still stay, then that relationship has transcended all ordinary forms of connection. The ancients understood very well that in times of prosperity, people come together for many reasons. It could be for self-interest, opportunity, fame, or fleeting emotion. But when misfortune strikes, all these layers fall away. Only a very simple question remains. Who are you in the hearts of others? And why do they stay? Those who don't turn their backs on you when you're down on your luck don't necessarily have to offer a lot of help or shoulder your burdens for you. They just need to maintain their attitude, their respect, and their previous manners. This is incredibly valuable, because in times of hardship, what hurts people the most isn't the lack of material things, but being looked down upon, rejected, and considered worthless. The ancients taught that when a person falls on hard times, every glance becomes more genuine. Every word becomes more truthful. Every distance becomes more real. And it is in that stark truth that who turns their back and who stays becomes clearly evident. There is no need for blame or resentment, for that is the natural essence of human nature. The highest level of achievement is not having many people by your side when you are strong, but having people who do not leave when you are weak. This cannot be bought with money, nor exchanged for profit, but can only be accumulated through virtue and morality throughout one's life. The ancients called this the blessing of character. Those who don't turn their backs on others when they fall on hard times are often not smooth talkers or promise makers, but rather those who never turned their backs on anyone when they were valuable. They didn't manipulate, exploit, or change their attitude based on strength or weakness. And when they fall on hard times, that same karma silently returns. The ancients understood this very well. If, while you are in a position of power, you know how to maintain moderation, how not to look down on those below you, and how not to discard those who are no longer beneficial to you, then when you fall, you will still have a place in people's hearts. Conversely, if you are arrogant when you are strong, and stingy when you have wealth, then loneliness is inevitable when you fall from grace. The person who doesn't turn their back on you when you're down on your luck is sometimes just someone who maintains an old greeting, an old attitude, an unchanged way of addressing you. But it's these small things that carry so much weight, because they say that in their eyes, you are still you, not redefined by circumstances. The ancients considered this the pinnacle of winning hearts and minds. Not because you can keep others for yourself, but because you have lived in such a way that even when you have nothing left, others still don't feel the need to leave. That is the result of a very long process. It cannot be rushed or performed. Throughout history, many people have fallen on hard times but have not been alone, not because they once gave generously, but because they held fast to their principles. They did not commit immoral acts when in power, did not betray others when profited, and did not abandon anyone they no longer needed. Therefore, when they lost their position, others still maintained a degree of respect for them. Even in times of hardship, some people remain by your side. They are often very quiet, not noisy, not clamoring, not boasting. They accept their circumstances without resentment. And it is this very calmness that makes it difficult for others to turn their backs on them, because no one wants to abandon someone who maintains their integrity in times of difficulty. The ancients also emphasized that not turning one's back doesn't mean staying at all costs. Some stay by remaining silent, some by refraining from speaking ill of others, and some by not denying past favors. All of these are very valuable forms of behavior in adversity. This highest level of achievement doesn't come from luck, but from a consistent way of life. When you don't use people as tools, when you don't view relationships as a transaction, when you maintain respect even with those who don't benefit you, and when you fall on hard times, you've already sown the seeds of not turning your back. Ancient people believed that if a person, even when down on their luck, is not abandoned, then even if they are slow to get back on their feet, they will not lose their way. It's because as long as their heart remains, the path remains. Conversely, a person who stands very high but has an empty heart will lose everything with just one fall. Ultimately, the highest level of winning hearts and minds is not making others need you, but making them reluctant to abandon you. When you are down on your luck, if there are still people who maintain their perspective, respect, and loyalty, that is the greatest achievement in a lifetime. It's not ostentatious or noisy, but it's enduring. And the ancients considered that the greatest blessing a person's character can bring. The ancients understood human nature very well. Therefore, they didn't place their trust only during times of prosperity. When everything was abundant, everyone was quick to speak kindly, everyone willing to cooperate. But the ancients saw further. They observed people during times of hardship, when there were no more benefits, when there was nothing left to offer. Because that is where human nature is most clearly revealed. Winning hearts and minds isn't about how much you give, but about how you live when you can no longer give. When you face difficulties, how you uphold integrity, maintain politeness, and remain kind to others is the most silent yet accurate test. Those you treated fairly, respectfully, and never abandoned will remember you for a long time. And when you have nothing left, they won't turn their backs on you. The ancients taught that if you live kindly enough during difficult times, you will not be alone when you rise again. You may not have many people around you, but those who remain are genuine people. People who come not for profit, nor leave because of hardship. It is these relationships that form the foundation for a person to stand firm in the face of adversity. The world is constantly changing. Status can be lost, money can dwindle, reputation can fade. But how you treat others in adversity will remain in their hearts for a long time. And that is what silently protects you when you are at your weakest. If you find these things thought-provoking, please share this video with those who have been with you through difficult times. And subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to continue learning how to live sustainably, live deeply, and stay connected amidst life's upheavals.